Hello, ladies, gentlemen, and anything in between. This is Fever Dog speaking, and today I'm going to be reading some scary stories I found on the internet. So sit back, relax, pop a bag of popcorn, and enjoy. This happened many years ago, and I don't remember it myself, but my mom told me about it, and it really creeps me out. I was either in first, second, or third grade when this happened, and I'm gonna need a lot of backstory on my school. So you can picture I was a little kid. The school has their own blocks for different grades. First to third grade had their own block called the AB block. The rest of the blocks were named C, D, E, etc. We had our own drama or theater studio in the basement. The AB block was in no way allowed in the studio unless older kids had a play going on. No adults would let us down there. With that being said, here's the story. I walked into the school, and when I got to the school, a man I didn't know asked me for help in the basement. I have two older brothers who went to the same school, so I knew every teacher at the time, and they knew me, but I didn't know this guy. That gave me the first alert. The second alert, he asked me for help. I was in the AB block, aka kids are the last people you ask for help. Third alert, we are under no circumstances allowed in the basement when there's no play going on. I ran to the nearest group of kids. My mom told the school, but the school did nothing about it. So creepy guy I don't remember, let's not meet. During my freshman year of college, I lived off campus with a kid I went to high school with. I barely knew him in high school. We just happened to be going to the same college out of state and teamed up on Facebook. We definitely became good friends after this story, and still are to this day. The house we were renting was in a suburb a few miles from school. All the houses in the neighborhood were older homes, but were super nice. They had a lot of charm to them. Anyways, it didn't take us long to decide that our house was insanely haunted. We would hear noises in the middle of the night. Stuff in our room collectively decided to not be where we left them. We even found milk spilled all over the kitchen floor in the middle of the night. At first it was actually really fascinating to me because I loved reality ghost series, and this confirmed to me that ghosts were real. But after a while it got pretty annoying. I'd get paranoid anytime it was too quiet in the house. We even called out a local group of paranormal investigators. They wanted to spend the night on our couch and record some audio because we kept hearing voices out of our walls. So they spent the night, and the next morning we all had breakfast and talked about how they didn't find much of anything. Then one of the guys talks about how my roommate got up in the middle of the night, and at one point they thought they heard voices and could get it recorded, but the sound of him opening and closing the fridge drowned it out. When my roommate got out of the shower, I poked fun at him for ruining it, but he said he slept all night long. The paranormal investigators chuckled and were basically like, "IDK man, we saw you, haha," but he swore it wasn't him. Everyone agreed to disagree. A few days go by and we still hear noises like usual. My roommate and I start getting into it a little bit about opening each other's food. I bought cereal I liked, and he opened it and took some without asking. He said I did the same thing, and we got pretty petty over it. Then, one night, we had a party. It was a good time with some genuinely good people. Not frat guys and D-bags. Anyways, everyone was congregated in the kitchen, like most do at parties. And I came out of the bathroom, and my good buddy was chuckling and said, "Yo, someone just climbed out of your attic." I was casually like, WTF? "Yeah, dude, this guy climbed out of your attic, on top of the fridge, then jumped onto the floor and walked back." For 5 seconds, I thought it was just a drunk college kid climbing up and trying to be funny, but then it hit me. Someone might be living in our attic. I find my roommate and tell him, and bring him in the kitchen and have my buddy tell him what happened. We told everyone at the party, and all my friends volunteered to climb up there and take a peek. This guy climbed up there and started throwing stuff out of the attic. A pillow, shoes, books, silverware, turkey meat, an umbrella, backpack, and all kinds of weird stuff. We call the cops, file a report, and stay at our friend's house for the night. We changed the locks and notified the landlord, neighbors, and attempted to break the lease. Fast forward a few weeks later, and we were about to move into our new place. I'm gonna make this short and sweet. The guy started lurking in our windows. He would bang on the back doors and leave notes saying, "Please let me in, I'm very sorry." Weird stuff like that. He even scared the living crap out of me when he started banging on the bathroom window one night while I was in there. We moved out and roomed somewhere else together. It was crazy. Around 2006, when I was 15 years old, my parents and I lived in a cul-de-sac. My nephews, who were almost my age, would often ride the bus to our home where my brother would pick them up later. We had two options. One, we can get off early at an apartment complex, where we could take a very short trip through the woods and get home before the bus got there. Or two, we could wait until the bus got to our actual stop. My nephews and I would usually choose the first one. One day, I had just made it outside to see what the other neighbor kids were up to when a very tall man approached me. I had always been fairly tall for my age, but this guy was huge. I remarked that I had indeed mentioned wanting a bike to him before, and that I was interested in the one that he was giving away. "It's just across the woods from my house," he said, and me, being a naive child, agreed to follow him. His house was on the upper level of the corner apartment where we usually got off the bus. He directed me to a large closet door beside the main entrance to his room where the bike was held. I inspected it and was like, "Yeah, this looks good. I'll definitely take it if you don't want it." "Oh, if it was only that easy." "Well, why don't you come in and chat for a bit?" he asked, and I once again agreed. Now I realize, especially after typing this out right now, that I'm basically in easy mode for kidnapping at this point. I was as big as most full-grown men at 16. Who would want/try to kidnap me, right? I walked in his front door and immediately noticed a pair of binoculars sitting by the window with a chair positioned oddly beside it. He sat in the chair next to the window, and I sat on the couch. He asked me to tell him about myself, so I did. We went back and forth for about 30 minutes in what seemed like an innocent talk, when I made the suggestion of going home, which he did not like. "Where do you have to be that's so important?" To which I told him Joey's. "Joey will be there when we're finished talking," he said, his tone dominant, like an abusive father speaking to his child. At this point, my "oh shit" alarm was finally going off. This guy's a lot bigger than I am, and he's closer to the door. What does he want with me? I wondered. I continued with the small talk, which seemed to calm him a bit. I noticed that he liked talking about his childhood. It was all he talked about. After 3.5 hours, I made the suggestion of going back home again. This time, he seemed okay with it. He walked me outside to the bike and repeated at least a half a dozen times to come back and visit him. The bike sat much higher than I was used to, but I was able to start pedaling once I drove off. Looking over my shoulder, he watched me until I was out of sight. Fast forward a few months. I obviously never visited him after getting creeped out. All my friends knew about him, and it was a joke amongst us where we called him Herbert from Family Guy. One day, I get something in the mail. It was a black envelope with big red polka dots all over it. It said, "Just for you, just because," with a $50 bill inside. I thought about who it might be, but hey, $50, hell yeah. Summer came around and my friends and I started to smoke weed. The usual hangout spot was the hill in the woods, a bit away from the trail that we always took for the bus, which just happened to be directly behind my house. I was visiting my family at the coast when I spoke to Joey on the phone. He said it was later at night when we were all smoking in the woods, and he noticed someone looking in my window while I wasn't there. They said he'd get really close to the window, walk to the edge of the house, and peek around the corner, and then go back to my window. It scared them bad enough to hide. They never confronted or could see who it was. We made the suggestion that it was Herbert, though. Months later, I stopped getting off the bus at Herbert's house. Instead, I would get on the opposite side of the bus and kind of stand against the wall so he couldn't see me. People poked fun at me until one girl on the bus screamed at the same stop. She jumped to my side of the bus and said, "He looked right at me. He was looking out the window. He was looking for you, wasn't he?" It scared the hell out of me. One day, I was standing in a circle talking to Joey and my nephews when Herbert walks up with a jump rope in his hand. He interjects the conversation and is like, "Does anyone want to jump rope?" My nephew is like, "Yeah, sure," and takes it from him. I don't remember much of what he said except for this: "Y'all should come see me sometime." He looked at me dead in the eyes with the angriest stare and said, "Because I know when people are lying to me." My friends all talked about it later, like, "WTF was that about? I don't think he likes you." I got off the bus one afternoon in front of my house when I saw my nephew running down the hill with something in his hand. "You have to read this! This guy's a freak!" he said, out of breath. Herbert had given something to my nephew that he gave to me. It was a black envelope with big red polka dots on it. Inside, it was obvious that he had a misunderstanding somewhere. "You've ruined what we could have had. I knew since the day I met you we could be special. It's ruined now, and it's all your fault. Why have you shunned me? If you start now, I might forgive you, and we can go back to normal." That was a rough summary of all of its contents. Keep in mind that I had spoken to this guy once when this all started. The envelope, the window watching, the way he worded stuff, it was clear that he thought about me a lot, and that he had this whole thing planned out. I immediately showed my parents, and to this day, I have not understood their reactions. "That's really weird. I don't want you to go over to his house again." No fucking shit. If that was my kid, I would have beat his door down and confronted him. But then again, that would have caused me some serious issues. I moved in with my brother until I graduated, and moved out on my own at 18. Still, it crosses my mind from time to time. I have a feeling that if he could do it over, I'd have never rode away on that bike. Back in 1998 or 99, I was around 5 or 6 years old and living in a crime and drug-ridden part of the downtown area. Our house had a giant yard that was full of thick jungle trees and bushes that had taken over the earth, and also random passerbys. We knew this due to the heroin needles that were around and half of a mattress that had once been on the forest floor and that has since grown 15 feet into the air with the trees. There was also a path that people would use as a shortcut to the main road, so there was a lot of traffic, with shady people passing through. When you're a kid, this is a nightmare of a backyard, so I was spooked since the time we moved in. I would complain constantly to my mom about someone watching me from outside my window when I was trying to sleep. Once or twice there had been times of him watching me, and he had shined a flashlight into my room. I saw a flash of his face, and I could still picture it. His dark eyes burned through me, and for a while, I never said anything, but eventually I told someone. My mom always thought it was just a nightmare, and brushed it off for a week or two, while ignoring my relentless complaints. Eventually, after having to fight with me to go to sleep one night, my mom had dragged me outside the next morning to prove me wrong. She went outside to my window, and to her surprise, the grass had been stomped on only outside of my window, to the point where the grass was almost all dead and only mud remained. There was also tons of scratch marks from a tool that someone kinda used outside the window, as if they were trying to break in. I was in a basement with one of those small windows that don't open, so breaking through there is super unlikely, but still shook my family. My mom was horrified and had to start making plans to move, but we were so broke growing up that leaving right away was not an option. Around that time, me and my best friend, who was also my next door neighbor, had become inseparable. We hung out almost constantly, and had no sense of danger. We would do dumb stuff, like go over to our neighbors' houses and ask for candy. Our favorite was this elderly lady who always had cakes for us, and we would actually go inside her house and hang out there. She was unbelievably nice, and she took care of us in a way. Our parents had no idea we did this, but it was our little secret. One day, we were playing around the neighborhood, and my mom yelled for me to come home so we could go pick up dinner around the corner. We were only gone for 15 minutes at most, and when we came back to the house, we were in complete shock. The street was closed off with crime scene tape. There were 2 or 3 news station vans, a dozen police cars, and either a life flight helicopter getting ready to touch down or a news helicopter. While we were gone getting food, a man who was not from the neighborhood had been staying with his mom for the past few weeks, had walked past my friend's yard and saw her on the phone. She was talking to a friend and making faces, or whatever young kids do, and this man thought she was making fun of him and talking on the phone. This man got so upset at the thought of somebody making fun of him that he walked back to his mom's house and came back with a butcher knife and was planning on killing this girl for mistreating him. Because of where she was sitting on the porch, she could see him coming back with the knife, and ran inside the home and locked herself in the bathroom and called the police with the phone that she luckily already had in her hand. Unfortunately, my friend's mom was in the kitchen and was not as lucky. The man took his anger out on her mother and stabbed her so many times that I can't even remember the number, but I think it was in the 20s. Somehow, after the amount of times her mother was stabbed, she survived and made a full recovery after many surgeries. After his arrest, the story was all over the news, and I remember watching it with my mom pretty religiously to make sure my friend's mom was alright. They posted his mugshot, and I remember the most intense amount of fear flowing through me. The man who had stabbed this woman was also the man who was outside my window. I also later found out that we had met this man weeks earlier at the elderly lady's house we had frequented for candy. It was her son, and he'd intentionally met us at her house and had been keeping an eye on us ever since. He had only gotten out of prison a month or so earlier and was staying at her house. I never took note of him when we first met, but maybe if I did, I would have known right away who my stalker was. We never did end up moving. My mom figured the danger was gone, so we stayed another year. To this day, I never sleep with the blinds open.